Folks, it's not good. As a matter of fact, it's kind of worst case scenario. The Supreme Court has made a ruling on the final day of their term, of this session, I mean, on the Trump immunity case, and as was kind of feared, but not necessarily expected in a partisan 6-3 ruling, the Supreme Court has turned over the decision of the lower court and granted Trump presidential immunity for official acts that are within the purview of his role as the president. What is an official act, you might be wondering? They won't tell you. Yeah. All right.
The Supreme Court has finally released its ruling on this long-awaited case, saying that Trump has immunity from official acts. In several cases, he
functionally has qualified immunity like a cop. It's definitionally the same. I think that's a good way of thinking of it, yeah. And as you all remember, qualified immunity is definitely like a super principled and limited protection that cops enjoy that is like freely challenged and subject to a lot of scrutiny, and definitely isn't just like a blanket pardon that protects them in entirely inconsistent ways.
They cite what official acts may be, but they also leave a number of others open for lower courts to make a final determination on. We're going to be talking a lot about the legal implications of all this. I want to first bring in CNN's Van Jones and Scott Jennings. Van, as you look at this, what stands out to you?
Well, it's a very concerning outcome.
Yeah.
You know, there's a maxim that says in law, bad facts create bad law. So when you have somebody doing stuff that's so terrible, the stuff that Trump did in office, it creates these bad facts. The court has to come in and figure out what to do about it. It often creates bad law. Basically, the question is, Supreme Court, do you more care about the unlawful conduct of a sitting president or possibly the unfair prosecution of a former president? That's really what they had to balance. They're obviously more
My man,
concerned,
you know he's flustered because he's normally like super smooth. He's like choking on his words right now. Jesus Christ.
about the latter. And so I think politically, it's bad. It makes the Supreme Court look very partisan. They're supposed to be wearing these kind of black and white umpire jerseys or whatever. They look like they're wearing red jerseys or even MAGA hats. It's going to go down bad politically for the Supreme Court. It's also scary because what is Trump going to do? If Trump gets elected and there's this idea that he can get away with even more.
What if the lower courts determine these acts are not considered under official acts and charges them for them? And Vosh, when that happens, I'm going to come back to your words. Damn, that's crazy, man. Hey, quick question. How's qualified immunity working out, like broadly, in terms of its ability to meaningfully regulate the extent to which officers can be charged for their behavior that falls within or adjacent to like the purview of official acts as a cop? What are you doing, man? Come on.
Stuff. That's really, really scary for the public because he already ran over every norm that he could. So it seems like, I'm just looking at this politically, not legally, politically, it's almost like a license to thug in a way. Like,
man, you are so lucky you're black, dude. Oh my God. Jesus Christ. Honestly, if I was like a well-respected like black political pundit, maybe I would also pepper my language with stuff like that just to make white people uncomfortable, you know? I think that'd be pretty funny, I think.
Like, you can do whatever you want, and the Supreme Court is probably going to let you get away with it. That is very frightening in this case, and so I'm very, very concerned.
Scott Jennings, Justice Sotomayor, in her dissent, essentially makes that argument, saying the main takeaway of today's decision is that all of a president's official acts defined without regard to motive or intent are entitled to immunity that is at least presumptive and quite possibly absolute.
Yeah, look, I think there's some amount of overreaction here. I mean, after all, they did kick it back down to the lower court, so some decisions could be made about differentiating between official and private acts. But look, this court has stood up for the office of the presidency and the executive power of the presidency in a way that, may be of some benefit to future presidents. I mean,
that's crazy, man. Wow. A person who looks like this taking the contrary position. Thank you, CNN, as always, for giving us the balanced perspective of a person who is correct and a person who is incorrect.
Looking at this through the lens of Donald Trump, but the President of the United States has a lot of power for a reason, and they do take a lot of official actions. And I think about a future where, if it was open season on presidents for time immemorial, what action would any president ever take?
It's crazy how there are people making this argument when this has literally never happened. There's never been an example of a former president being hounded for the rest of their life by unjustified charges that are just a natural byproduct of their time in the presidency. Like, we have 250 years, we have a quarter millennia of precedent of that not happening, even after presidents have committed numerous crimes, and it just didn't happen. So the idea that, like, this is a genuine threat that must be met with, like, oh, well, the only way we could protect presidents from this thing that has never happened would be for us to give them qualified immunity. It's insane. Isn't it crazy that Nixon would just be exonerated under this? Yeah.
Out of fear of being dragged into a courtroom every time they did it. So I hear
something that has never happened, by the way, something that has never once happened.
And I think there's interesting arguments on both sides of this today. I've listened to some of arguments like what Van has made, but at the same time, I do think the office deserves a lot of protection and a lot of deference because of the special place that it holds in our system. So I'm okay with it, especially because I think.
I mean, literally, like, what is this argument? I think the presidency should be immune to prosecution for their crimes because the presidency is special. Like, my bro, you would have been a loyalist in the Revolutionary War. They would have had your ass out there on Main Street, you know, up against a wall. What are you talking about?
The lower court may have decisions to make in the future, of course, depending on the outcome of the election in November.
But Van, just to be clear, even if a lower court makes a ruling, then that can, because what the Supreme Court says is that can be appealed ultimately back to the Supreme Court.
And this is the reason why it literally, like, doesn't matter, right? You know, people are saying, like, oh, well, now Biden can do whatever he wants, or, oh, well, that doesn't mean that lower courts couldn't find Trump's behavior to not be, like, an official act of the presidency, and therefore he doesn't have immunity. It doesn't matter. The Supreme Court is conservative. The Supreme Court has completely gone mask off 6-3 on the extent of its partisan bias. They have been deliberately delaying to the greatest possible extent every ruling they could. This was on the last day of this session. Anything to keep Jack Smith from pursuing the federal charges that he has laid against Donald Trump. Anything that sets this back. Now, with the delays this puts in place, it's not going to be even possible to hit Trump with these federal charges until possibly he becomes president, at which point he could just have a DOJ not prosecute him for it, or he could have he could just have them pardoned. He could pardon his own charges. Another thing that people will go, oh, well, we don't know if he could do that, but he would. He could. And the Supreme Court would say he could. Like, it's so transparently biased. So to look at this, like, fascist systemically gutting every protection we have against an autocracy, like deliberately and maliciously twisting every rule, making every ruling, bending and breaking everything for a certain specific outcome, which is the protection of Donald Trump as he moves into another term, for people to go like, oh, don't worry, the procedures that the evil men have control of will save us. Come on.
Yeah, look, I think the Supreme Court is really hurting itself here. I mean, I think most Americans on either side would have preferred us getting some kind of finality around these cases. And what you see is the Supreme Court just dragging this out and dragging this out. They could have weighed in on all this stuff back in March and cleared the decks on this one way or the other. They didn't. They say, go through the whole process and you come back up here. Then they wait 60 plus days past the buzzer to give us this decision. The way it's structured, this thing is going to ping pong back and forth for 3 or 4 more years maybe. It seems like they're doing Donald Trump a favor when they don't have to. The ruling does seem to be much more concerned about unleashing the presidency than constraining the presidency. That's fine, except that there's a different balance here. Now you're concerned about a renegade president. Are you concerned about a renegade president prosecuting someone unfairly after the fact, or acting like a rogue or a thug in office? It's not clear what's the greater threat to the republic, and it doesn't seem like the...
All right, we waffling. We waffling a little bit. And you know what? That's fine. Let's just read from the experts, huh? Let's just read from the experts. Liberal justices say Trump immunity decision will have disastrous consequence for the U.S. If you think that we're dooming, baby, listen to Sotomayor, okay? The Supreme Court's liberal bloc issued blistering dissents Monday in the Trump immunity ruling, arguing that it reshapes the institution of the presidency and makes a mockery of the constitutional principle that no man is above the law. Justice Sonia Sotomayor, reading her dissent from the bench, said that relying on little more than its own misguided wisdom, the court gives former President Trump all the immunity he asked for and more. She added that because our Constitution does not shield a former president from answering for criminal or treasonous acts, I dissent. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 on ideological lines that former President Donald Trump has immunity for some of his conduct as president, but not unofficial acts in the federal election interference case. The court did not determine what constitutes an official act in this case, leaving it at the lower court. Why do you think they did that, guys? Why do you think they did that? They did that because specifically defining what an official act is means that it's a settled jurisprudence, and Jack Smith or other prosecutors could just work around that and prosecute Trump for the stuff that does not count as an official act. By not saying what an official act is and leaving it vague, it guarantees future years of deliberation, effectively guaranteeing that it's impossible to prosecute Trump for anything. Even if you did manage to solidify something that was an unofficial act that you could prosecute him for, the process of determining that it was an unofficial act, if the Supreme Court even let you, would take years. And they could interfere again if they wanted to. What is the basis for their ruling? The voices in their head. It doesn't matter. Does the Supreme Court deliberate among themselves privately before doing public rulings? Well, yeah, of course. I mean, they have time to talk it out. This has been on the case for months. The decision adds another hurdle and further delay to special counsel Jack Smith's prosecution of the former president. Trump was indicted last year on charges he conspired to overturn the legitimate results of the 2020 presidential election. How the f do you fix this? I can't answer that on YouTube. Sotomayor said the majority opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts invents quote, an atextual, ahistorical, and unjustifiable immunity that puts the president above the law. Just to be clear, there is literally no, constitutional precedent for this. There's no, oh, I see, because of the law, they had to, there's none of that. None of that is present here. This feels kind of doomer. Do you know what doomer means? Doomer is a mind state. I am reading from an NBC News article. What are you talking about? Wouldn't the same ruling apply to Biden? No, because the people who would make the final decision on whether or not an official act is an official act is the Supreme Court that just made this ruling. It's like loitering laws don't mention black people in them, but for some reason black people are always the ones getting hassled by cops, not white people. You can't trust on the impartiality of the system. Their ruling, she went on, makes 3 moves that she said completely insulates presidents from criminal liability. Sotomayor said the court creates absolute immunity for the president's exercise of core constitutional powers, creates expansive immunity for all official acts, and declares that evidence concerning acts for which the president is immune can play no role in any criminal prosecution against him. So let's run that through, okay? Core constitutional powers. This could potentially mean that the president is completely, unequivocally, unimpeachably immune from prosecution for any act that involves things like protecting the United States, which sounds good until you remember that protecting the United States is an incredibly vague term. People will argue, oh no, there's a lot of nuance here. I don't buy it. Bullshit. If it's for Trump and the court is defending him, it could mean anything, you know? Much in the same way that qualified immunity gives cops basically all the protection in the world that they want. Core constitutional powers covers a lot of ground. Likewise for official acts, which literally means immunity for any act that is an invested component of one's role in the presidency, you know? What does that mean? It means everything. But furthermore, in addition, it means that if the president does something untoward that is part of an official act, any evidence in that line, it cannot play a role in any criminal prosecution against him. Meaning, for example, that if Donald Trump did something criminal that was not found to be an official act, you couldn't substantiate any case against him with behavior that fell within the purview of an official act. So, for instance, if Donald Trump wanted to break the law in a way that was not official, say assassinate a journalist or something like that, that might be deemed unofficial, depending. But if there's a bunch of supporting evidence that is official, say talking with the Joint Chiefs of Staff or talking with the cabinet about assassinating that journalist, that's all an official act. Therefore, that evidence cannot be entered into court. So not only can he not be found criminally liable for official acts, but anything he does that falls within the purview of an official act can't even be brought up as evidence for an unofficial act. Again, in essence, this is total immunity. Sotomayor warned the ruling will have disastrous consequences for the presidency and for our democracy, and that it sends the message, quote, let the president violate the law, let him exploit the trappings of his office for personal gain, let him use his official power for evil ends. She added, even if these nightmare scenarios never play out, and I pray they never do, the damage has been done. The relationship between the president and the people he serves has shifted irrevocably. In every use of official power, the president is now a king above the law. Interestingly, Amy Coney Barrett concurred with parts of Sotomayor's dissent, even though she ruled with the majority. Notably, she said she agreed with the dissenters that Trump's immune conduct should still be allowed to be used as evidence in his trial. So Amy Coney Barrett disagrees with the third point of the three, essentially saying that official acts can still be part of evidence in a case against an unofficial act that is found to be criminal. The Constitution does not require blinding juries to the circumstances surrounding conduct for which presidents can be held liable. Ketanji Brown Jackson said the majority's ruling breaks new and dangerous ground. Departing from the traditional model of individual accountability, the majority has concocted something entirely different, a presidential accountability model that creates immunity, an exemption from criminal law, applicable only to the most powerful official in our government. Jackson warned that under the majority's new presidential accountability mode, a hypothetical president who admits to having ordered the assassinations of his political rivals or critics, or one who indisputably instigates an unsuccessful coup, has a fair shot at getting immunity. The Chief Justice dismissed the dissents, Roberts, suggesting that his three liberal colleagues had misinterpreted the majority's opinion and were engaged in fear-mongering. Classic. Roberts argued that they, quote, strike a tone of chilling doom that is wholly disproportionate to what the court actually does today. He wrote that, quote, like everyone else, the president is subject to prosecution in his unofficial capacity. Really assuaging the fears there, you know? He also appeared to scoff at Sotomayor for what she included in her dissent, saying that her, quote, most compelling piece of evidence consists of excerpted statements from Charles Pinckney from an 1800 Senate debate. He continued, but those statements reflect only the now discredited argument that any immunity not expressly mentioned in the Constitution must not exist. Meaningless dissent from Roberts, meaningless criticism from, to the minority's dissent, you know? And then Amy Coney Barrett, et cetera, yeah. Real lawyers are freaking out over this? Yeah, of course, because it's insane. It is like Trump is above the law. There's no other way to put it. Like, yeah, yeah. So Trump is going to be a dictator when he wins? In his own words, yes. Yeah, from Sotomayor's dissent. I'm surprised they didn't include this in the NBC article. From Sotomayor, this is her writing in the dissent. Looking beyond the fate of this particular prosecution, the long-term consequences of today's decision are stark. The court effectively creates a law-free zone around the president, upsetting the status quo that has existed since the founding. This new official acts immunity now lies about like a loaded weapon for any president that wishes to place his own interests, his own political survival, or his own financial gain above the interests of the nation. The President of the United States is the most powerful person in the country and possibly the world. When he uses his official powers in any way under the majority's reasoning, he will now be insulated from criminal prosecution. Orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune. Immune. Let the president violate the law, let him exploit the trappings of his office for... We saw this part. The rest of it we saw in the NBC article. New Biden strat. No, see, here's the problem, guys. The problem is that Biden won't do any of this. Partly because he's a massive pussy and because the Democrats don't understand the field that they're playing on, and partly because the Supreme Court is conservative. Also, who cares whether or not he has criminal immunity? You know, Biden has what, like 5 months to live? Motherfucking ancient, you know? Who cares whether or not he's going to be subject to criminal prosecution? This is their last-ditch effort. This is the big final hurdle. This guarantees that Donald Trump will not be meaningfully challenged in a legal sense before he enters, before November 5th, before he potentially wins, even before his inauguration. And it means that if he does manage to make it in for a second term, he will have basically no holds barred on his abilities. He will be effectively immune to criminal prosecution. He will have a majority in the Supreme Court. He will almost certainly have one of the two branches of the legislature. It will not be possible to impeach him because we will not have like a supermajority in the Senate. He will be completely protected in all of his behavior. He will be able to do anything that he wants. With Project 2025, he will gut the administrative state. He will be able to act through the the administrative agencies, the regulators, as much as he pleases, to the extent that he is able to. That's pretty much that, you know? Did Biden's debate performance embolden the Supreme Court? No. They were planning on doing this at the last possible day because the longer they delayed, the more of an obstruction they would be to Jack Smith. All their behavior has been designed, like in the broader sense, to protect Trump from the existing criminal prosecution. It's all been like a partisan effort. They moved incredibly quickly with the Colorado ruling to keep Trump off the ballot due to his insurrectionary behavior. They moved incredibly slowly on everything else. Like everything has been designed. I heard the opposite to Queen, that they did not make it retroactive. But I mean, did it make them more confident this wouldn't be backlash electorally? Oh, I don't know, but they already would have been like primed to make this decision at this time. The debate was only a few days ago. So has the Supreme Court essentially just decided that impeachment is the only way to punish a president? Essentially, at the moment, yes. And impeachment is also impossible because in this partisan climate, there won't be enough of a lean in the Senate in either direction, you know? Right, the only legal way. Do you think this might galvanize voters against Trump? If the Democrats cared about winning, which they don't, they would be screaming from the rooftops about how like the Supreme Court has granted Trump immunity and that he will be a king over the land if he is given power again. But they're not going to. Like the Democrats should be screeching from like the Democrats should be having $60,000 a plate fundraisers in New York City every day from now until November 5th, and they should be dumping money into television, radio, and internet ads. They should be flooding Twitter with like low ad buys. You know, if RFK Jr. can buy the head of the like trending page for on the debate day for his own little like self-aggrandizing "I'm in the debate too, guys, pay attention to me" little mini documentary, I promise you the Democrats can afford it too. But the Democrats are incompetent and they don't know how to spend their money, so we'll see. I know it's not enough, but Nancy Pelosi called SCOTUS a rogue court. Not only is it not enough, it's completely meaningless. Rogue court doesn't mean anything. Like this doesn't like bring the voters in any meaningful fashion, you know? Also, Nancy Pelosi has very little credibility outside of people who are already going to vote Democrat. AOC has said that once they return from break, once the congressional session begins once more, AOC is going to draft articles of impeachment against the Supreme Court, which I fully support, even though it's not going to go anywhere. The Supreme Court has become consumed by a corruption crisis beyond its control. Today's ruling represents an assault on American democracy. It is up to Congress to defend our nation from this authoritarian capture. I intend on filing articles of impeachment upon our return. Top reply from right-wing dad. The SCOTUS didn't rule how I would like, therefore it's corrupt. Yes, unironically, yes, that is true. Yes. Well, it's a tweet, Mindforge. Biden hasn't even posted about it yet. Yeah, like this is the difference in energy between the right and the left, man. Like the Donald Trump truthed on Truth Social the nanosecond the case came out, saying like, "Ooh, we win bigly," like whatever. You know, it's just insane. The incompetence of the Democrats in their messaging and their ability to get people in there. 1 hour ago, about inflation. 10 minutes ago, surprise travel junk fees. What are you doing, man? What are you doing? The court just ruled that the president is a king. Where the fuck are you? But Biden can't do anything because he can't talk in public for more than 5 minutes without, like, creating another scandal, so it doesn't matter. My God, that's true. He can't even address the nation? Well, no. Biden has never been able to, like, quickly and aggressively respond to any change in political circumstances by going up there in front of the nation and talking to them. He only when was the last time he did a big empowered speech? Wasn't it his like dark Brandon red background in front of the White House speech that was like over a year ago? Like, you know, Donald Trump could be busting those out every 3 days, right? Biden can't because the motherfucker's too old. He can't talk anymore. State of the Union? The State of the Union one was fine. That's a required speech. I'm talking about getting out there and like addressing the nation impromptu, you know, for your own reasons, not fulfilling a constitutional obligation to do the State of the Union address. Will be kind of fun seeing Trump try to be a dictator who's too dumb to do anything meaningful. He's dumb, but he's surrounded by people who want to take advantage of his occupation of the office to do real damage. That's the whole point of Project 2025. Project 2025 isn't something Trump drafted. It's something that a bunch of Heritage Foundation ghouls drafted because they know that Trump is a blunt instrument that they can use. Like, they all understand that Donald Trump is too incompetent to meaningfully, like, enable their sort of, like, Christian fundamentalist, white nationalist autocracy, you know, where business taxes are down to 0.1% or whatever. They know they can't get that done through Trump's will, so they're trying to like break the administrative state to make it possible. It would be funny if Kamala and the cabinet invoked Article 25 of the Constitution to remove the president, sort of military junta. I mean, we are like rapidly moving to a point where it seems like the only thing the Democrats can do. The Democrats had like the initial option for preventing this would have been fielding a good candidate who could win and like undo some damage in the following presidential term, as Democrats so often promise and fail to do. Failing that, because they decide to go with Biden again, like the next step, the next thing they could do is get real aggressive, you know, and sort of like preventatively sort of assuage the threat to the country by treating this as a preemptive coup attempt, which they're not going to do, even though it definitely is. Because they literally, they have like no ability to act outside of institutional lines. They don't want to fire the first shot. Yeah, it's genuinely crazy because Democrats don't want to fire the first shot. Like the Democrats and Republicans are on either sides of the field with like dueling pistols. And what the Republicans have done is they put a silencer on their pistol and fired 17 times directly into the Democrats' chest. And the Democrats are like, yeah, wait, we have to hold on. We haven't heard the first shot yet. You know, it's insane, but that's how it is, man. The Democrats are just gonna get shot over and over and over with the silenced pistol until it's like until it doesn't matter anymore.